Ladies and gentlemen, today is May the 3rd, 2026, and we are here to talk about the world, current events, foreign policy, economics, you name it, we'll talk about it in another episode of World Discussion with Agent Smith. Smith.
Hello.
Sir.
Hey. How are you doing?
Doing rather well. 2-0 from my Dota games today. Had some steak grilled by Dad and some pasta with dinner, so winning all around.
Yeah, living it up today.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
Yeah, people are excited to hear from you today. Already someone in the chat saying, hoping he'll finally talk about Godzilla tonight. I still have to watch -1. I heard that one's good.
Yeah, that's probably the best one. And there's a sequel to it coming out before too long, actually. Yeah, I think they're calling it Godzilla -0 this time.
Oh. So then they'll do Godzilla -1 next time?
I don't know if they'll make it a trilogy. We'll have to see how the second one does. I was kind of surprised they did a sequel at all. Kind of figured the -1 movie would be a kind of a standalone, but I guess not.
That one's set in World War II?
No, actually, it's set in the immediate aftermath of World War II.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the reason for the name. -1 is supposed to reflect the fact that Japan was less than 0 after World War II. Things were so bad that it was just even less than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not a whole lot of, well, certainly no Godzilla movies have been set in that time period. Before -1, the earliest setting had been the 1950s. Unless you want to get into the comics, which is a whole other animal.
Well, it's still Godzilla.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the same animal.
Well, okay. Technically, yes.
But the turn of phrase is valid. I see what you mean.
Gotcha. Well, how's your week been?
Good. Lots of push-ups. We've had a mixture of summer days and snowy days because we get the majority of our precipitation in South Dakota during April. But April isn't the coldest month. It's pretty far from the coldest. So it's usually barely cold enough for the snow to stick. So it'll have maybe a high of in the 40s during the day. And then at night it maybe dips into the 20s. But it's relatively warm during this month as compared to December through February. Those are way colder.
Was the power staying on at least?
Yep. Really, it's just the high winds that cause that,
Gotcha.
which we haven't had too many. And I think they upgraded our power cable to be more resilient to the wind.
Well, that's good.
What they told us, yeah.
So it's just wet now, basically.
Not really. It is really sunny during the day, so any moisture tends to evaporate pretty quickly. So we had a very nice day today. And we found out that we qualify for some government assistance / compensation for the number of trees that fell down on our property.
Really?
That can do a lot of damage to the community, yeah, and it's kind of random chance, so I don't know which department decided that, but if it's past a certain number of trees, then I think they send you some money for the cleanup process, so you could hire people to take care of it for you.
Huh. Interesting public service.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
We had 9 trees downed, I think.
So is the issue that you have to, that it's expensive to remove them and the government helps with that? Or is it a public safety thing?
It might be a public safety thing. I think it increases the risk of forest fire spreading if the trees are on the
Oh,
ground, but I'm not
wow.
totally certain about that. So, yeah, it
Okay.
might be safety in addition to the economic factor.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Pretty
You can
neat.
do it just as a normal citizen. My father has a wood splitter and then a few other tools that we use to kind of break things down. So it's definitely doable for a citizen if they have the equipment, but the equipment to like really take care of a fallen tree is definitely thousands of dollars. So that would help a
Mm,
lot of homeowners and people who live around South Dakota. It's not a very high income state, I don't think.
no, no, not South Dakota. North Dakota, a little more so, mostly just because of all the oil.
Mm.
But I don't think South Dakota has nearly as much of that.
I heard Montana has a section of the state that's like really rich and expensive to live in.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's the capital. Maybe I'm wrong.
Helena, I think, is the capital.
Might be that. Maybe someone in chat knows.
Helena is apparently not the largest city in Montana, which surprised me. Normally, those western states don't really have a lot of big population centers, so the largest city is almost always the capital, but not so in Montana.
What's the largest?
Okay. Apparently, it's a city called Billing,
Oh.
Montana.
Hmm.
Yeah, kind of a legacy mining town. It's sort of more up in the mountains.
Let's see.
Yeah, Montana is kind of a funky state because it's gotten a lot of I don't know if immigrant is quite the right quite the right word. They've had a lot of population increase stemming from people moving in from other parts of the country over the past 10, 20 years
Mm-hmm.
to the point where it's not as politically red as it used to be. Still fairly conservative, but it's more competitive than a lot of the surrounding states. Yeah, I think I remember reading that a lot of tech industry type people have been moving in. It's fantastic nature out there, so I'm sure that's a relevant factor. But other than that, I don't know exactly what the draw was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it may go the way of Colorado before too long.
What's the way of Colorado?
Colorado used to be a very conservative mountain state, sort of a prototypical Western bent, but over time there was so much economic growth and development that urban centers started sprouting up that were much more left wing than the rest of the states, to the point where they became the dominant voting bloc and shifted Colorado into the reliably Democrat voting camp. So that's a relatively recent dynamic. I think maybe only 10, 15 years that it's been doing that, that it shifted more reliably to the left. Before that, it was fairly competitive. I remember distinctly at one point that it was considered a purple state, a swing state, but not so much anymore. I think Colorado Springs, obviously Denver, and a couple other population centers really grew pretty rapidly.
Well, I go to Denver Airport a lot, being from here. That's usually where you make your connection to go to anywhere else.
Gotcha. Yeah, Denver's a pretty important node out there in the West. I think it's the only major metro area for probably a couple hundred miles in that area. Probably Salt Lake City would be the closest other metro area.
Mm-hmm. I've been there as well, but I haven't lived in Salt Lake.
It's doing really well. It's growing pretty quickly in its own right. Probably won't go Democrat, though, like some of the other places. Utah may well be the exception. We'll see. Utah's kind of got a unique thing going on account of its weird history. So I don't know that it'll develop in quite the same way as the other states in the West.
Yeah, how substantial is the Mormon influence in Utah politics?
It's pretty substantial. I mean, it's not so overt that the church outright intercedes in politics like it used to, but yeah, it's I mean, there's just so many Mormons living there, and the state's overall political culture and makeup is so conservative that it kind of can't help but be influential. It's basically the dominant social and political zeitgeist out there. Yeah, there used to be some tension between the Mormon and non-Mormon community there, such that they basically comprised the core of two competing voting blocs. But then over time, that kind of changed, and they sort of merged together. You know, the overarching national political culture kind of pushed them together, despite the antagonistic history.
What did they unite on?
Culture war type stuff. I mean, they're both socially conservative. They broadly agree on like most social and economic issues, such as they are in the national political discussion. Yeah, national politics has become more and more important, more and more defining of state and local politics over the past couple decades. And that's kind of served to overshadow some traditional political cleavages at the local and state level. Yeah, and so much as there's Democrats in Utah, they tend to be more the metropolitan, urban, progressive variety, centered in the cities.
Wasn't Mitt Romney Mormon? I guess
Oh, yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I think he was governor of Utah. Oversaw the Olympics at Salt Lake City back in the day. Wait, am I thinking of the right guy? No, he was governor of Massachusetts, wasn't he? Was he governor of both? Now I'm forgetting. Oh, maybe it was senator from Utah. Yeah, senator from Utah from 2019 to 2025. And then he was governor of Massachusetts from 2003 to 2007. There you go. And he is and was Mormon.
He was and continues to be Mormon.
Yeah. Yeah, I think his father ran for president decades ago. Didn't end up working out. But Mitt is the second generation then in his family to make an effort. Yeah, candidate quality for the GOP was higher back in the day, before 2016. Mitt Romney, John McCain, those were pretty strong candidates in their own right.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was a fan of either of them at the time in the sense that they were someone I followed particularly closely, but looking back, it seemed like they had a lot more stability and better credentials for politics. The thing that I liked about yeah, well, the thing that I appreciated about McCain was that he thought for himself sometimes and voted against his party on certain topics, which I feel like it takes a certain level of veteran politician to be able to get away with that. Because I think a lot of times if you're new, then and you aren't playing inside the party lines, then they're just gonna like give you less opportunities, find a way to make your situation worse. But if you're someone who has been involved in U.S. politics for as long as McCain and has like the war hero record or whatever, then he had more leeway to be a quote maverick. So it goes. We'll see what happens.
Well, was there anything that kind of stuck out to you in the past week?
Not really. I'm watching Invincible on Amazon Prime Video or whatever. It's pretty good. It's kind of a similar idea to The Boys in that it's a darker take on superheroes, but it's animated, so a little bit less shock factor than the real life stuff of The Boys.
Gotcha. Well, would you recommend it so far?
5 episodes into it? Sure, I guess. I don't feel super strongly about it, but yeah, if you like superhero stuff and you don't mind a bit of blood and guts, then I would recommend it.
Gotcha. I haven't really been watching any TV or movies in the past week. For the past couple days, I have been watching a Chinese webtoon. Weirdly enough. It's not really about anything. It's just sort of slice of life stuff and I guess a little bit of drama, but nothing like fantastic. It's just kind of like mostly a comedy thing. I mostly just found it interesting because there's not a lot of Chinese content that kind of makes it into my media cycle, right? Just because of the algorithm. So I kind of thought it was a good opportunity to refamiliarize myself to a degree with some Chinese culture, because embedded in the show is customs, norms, etc., turns of phrase. Yeah, it's been fun. It's not subtitled, so I have no idea what's happening 90% of the time.
Oh, damn.
But they do a good job of conveying feeling and the general gist of what's going on with the animation. So
brave of you to watch a show in a language you don't fully understand.
Well, like I said, they do a good job with it. You don't necessarily need all of the details to get what they're kind of doing and what the gist of the and they're shorts. They're only like 4 minutes, 10 minutes maybe. So it's not like a big investment. Yeah, I think the YouTube channel is Hoshin. Or at least that's what it sounds like. I'm not sure what the Mandarin would be. No. Yeah, there's a couple Hoshins. One of them is the one I'm talking about. But other than that, haven't really seen anything media-wise. I'm still waiting for Free Run to finish before I jump back into Crunchyroll.
Oh, you're waiting for the season 2 to finish?
Yeah, so that I can binge all of it without having to wait.
Yeah.
I'm impatient.
Yeah, I don't know of any news stuff that really stood out to me. I think it was a pretty quiet week.
Yeah.
Chat wasn't buzzing about much either. Like, I can't wait for Agent Smith to talk about this. Like, people wanted to know what you were going to think about Godzilla, so I think that kind of tells you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of Godzilla content I haven't seen. Just because there's been so much of it produced over the past 10 years, especially here in the US. There's a whole last TV show that I haven't seen yet. And it's been out for several years now. I think it's called Monarch, something like that. Yeah. Don't even really know what it's about. Childhood me would be very disappointed with adult me. Well, there's a number of items I have, so we could just kind of start into some of them.
Sure.
If there's nothing in particular you wanted to get to.
Yep, we have Sea of Whiskey taking questions today, so those are available whenever.
Thank you, Sea of Whiskey. Well, did you hear that the UAE is leaving OPEC?
No.
Yeah, they announced that in the past week. So there was some drama about that. It's probably not going to matter all that much in the grand scheme of things. They comprised 15% of OPEC's total production. So it's not a backbreaker for OPEC. And keep in mind, OPEC has been coordinating more closely with a number of countries that are major oil producers, but which are not technically members of OPEC. And so they form a grouping that's known as OPEC Plus. So it includes countries like Russia, for example. So losing the UAE is going to hurt a bit, but given how small their production is relative to the whole, and given how much larger OPEC Plus production is than even just OPEC production, I don't think OPEC will be dented too badly here. But it does illustrate some underlying tension in the GCC. The Emiratis have kind of been at loggerheads with the Saudis a number of times over the past 10 years. And so this is sort of the latest manifestation of that tension. What I read is that it stemmed from, besides just strategic differences, the bigger driver is that the Saudis were not allowing the UAE to change its quota within OPEC to reflect the investment that the UAE had been making in its oil production. So they had been investing quite a bit in oil production over the past 10 years, and so their capacity had increased. But the Saudis were not allowing their quota to increase correspondingly to reflect that increase in capacity. And the Emiratis were upset about that. And so leaving OPEC is now going to give them the opportunity to just ignore the quota entirely and produce as much as they want. It's not impossible, now that I think about it, that the Emiratis could end up in OPEC Plus. So even though they're out of OPEC, that doesn't mean that they will not coordinate at all with OPEC. They'll just be coordinating with them as an outsider, like the Russians do. So that should give them more freedom of movement, a little more discretion.
See.
So that was probably the hottest and sexiest item in the past week.
Wow. I don't know. Because I had Monica Bellucci in one of my recent Dota games.
Well, that's a fair point. Monica Bellucci probably is much hotter and sexier than the Emiratis leaving OPEC. We'll concede that point.
Yeah. What can you do?
Let's see. Oh, I forgot to start the stopwatch.
We are 24 minutes in.
Already? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Time flies. Did I recommend Money and Macro to you? It's a YouTube channel.
I don't think so. Sounds like a StarCraft thing.
I'm afraid not. It's It's an economist from the Netherlands who just does commentary on global economic issues and whatnot from the perspective of an economist. He's probably the most qualified economics commentator on YouTube who does any kind of regular work anyway. So I would recommend him if I haven't already. And I bring it up today because he released a video recently talking about the petrodollar and debunking a lot of common misunderstandings about it. So that kind of reinforced an earlier iteration of this segment when I was talking about pretty much exactly that. So if you want a more coherent, intelligent critique of the petrodollar myth, that recent YouTube video is better than anything I've done on it. So definitely give that a try. I'll send you the link.
Cool.
Oh yeah, did you see that Lena inverse thing I sent you?
I did not.
Yeah, I sent it like right at the tail end last time.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, after I briefly mentioned it.
Alina,
Yeah,
the Dota hero.
Does she have a move in the game called Dragon Slave?
Yes, that's her first ability.
That video I sent you is the origin of that in the show.
Ah, cool. Yeah, there's her ultimate ability is called Laguna Blade. I don't know if that's also a thing.
Yep, that's also from the show.
Yes.
I think it was called Ragna Blade in the English translation.
Huh.
Let's see. What else did we have? Some US drama, but nothing too dramatic. I guess we could just do the Iran update and get it out of the way. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This will be pretty short and sweet, kind of like last time. So one interesting item I discovered about the US blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is that it does not encompass Iranian ports east of the Strait of Hormuz, which surprised me. I would have thought the blockade would have been for the entire Iranian coast, but apparently it's not. So if you want to ship stuff to Iran, or maybe even out of Iran, you can totally do that so long as you're doing it out of a port that is east of the strait. And Iran does have a couple of those. And apparently the US Navy does not intercept the ships coming and going from those ports. Yeah, what I read is that the blockade is narrowly focused on the Strait of Hormuz and oil tankers. Cargo ships are apparently of secondary importance. Yeah, so the American position only ever seems to get more confusing. Lots of very particular niche moves that are a little bit counterintuitive. I would have thought that fighting a war with Iran would mean an implicit blockade that encompassed the totality of the Iranian coast right from the start of the conflict. But that hasn't happened. Instead, it's just been kind of a slow escalation towards a full blockade. But we haven't really reached that full blockade yet. It's instead just sort of been incremental. Very odd stuff. I don't really know why the administration has done it like that. Intuitively, it's because they want to minimize disruption to energy markets. But as we've kind of discussed before, that's weird logic. Let's see, the other item I had here had to do with the War Powers Act. So nominally, after 60 days, an administration indulging in some overseas military adventure is required to get approval from Congress to continue doing so. And we've hit the 60-day mark on the Iran conflict, but the administration says they don't need congressional approval because of the ceasefire. In fact, Trump at one point in the past week went so far as to say that the conflict had been, quote unquote, terminated, which is obviously false, since a ceasefire is not a final peace agreement of any kind. It's just a temporary halt in the fighting. So the conflict is nominally ongoing, but the administration is trying to use this excuse as a workaround to avoid having to go to Congress. Most likely they will get away with it. No surprises there. So as expected, the War Powers Act is not going to be a barrier here for the Trump administration. They're going to work around it. Most likely, Congress is going to accede to that. Kind of a side note here on the war's economic impact. We've had a laundry list of items, specific products and markets that have been disrupted by the conflict. So the newest addition to that list is a spice called saffron. So apparently 90% of the world's supply of saffron comes from Iran, and more specifically the province of Khorasan. So apparently the supply of that good has been severely disrupted, resulting in shortages and price increases. Also, adding to that problem, the Iranian government itself has apparently banned the export of all food and agricultural products since the conflict started. And so that's exacerbated shortages and inflation in the market for saffron. I guess it kind of makes sense for the Iranian government to do that. If there is going to be a conflict, then presumably there's going to be disruptions to deliveries of imports. So it makes sense then to try to hoard as much of your own agriculture as you can to try to offset any potential disruptions to international supply. But then there are knock-on effects there for apparently saffron. Okay, and then as far as international diplomacy, Germany, regarding Germany, the United States government announced that it was going to withdraw 5,000 troops, again, from Germany. And apparently this is retaliation for statements from the Prime Minister of Germany, who had stated that the Iranians were humiliating the United States in talks, and that he could not divine any kind of exit strategy that Washington seemed to be actively pursuing. As you can imagine, that did not go down well with the Trump administration. Trump already had issued some invective about the Prime Minister of Germany, and specifically in response to his statements. And so now, in this past week, he has escalated by announcing the withdrawal of several thousand troops from Germany. I kind of suspect this is just theater, so it's either not going to happen or there was already some plan to withdraw troops. That generally seems to be the MO for the Trump administration as far as its attempts at kayfabe. I did see a statistic that there's about 35,000 troops in Germany, so 5,000 isn't really a backbreaker, and it could be easily reversed. Let's see, and the Trump administration, more specifically the president himself, has also been trading some barbs with the Prime Minister of Italy. That has to do with the Italian government's position vis-a-vis Iran, which is that they're willing to allow the United States to use its bases in Italy, but the Italian government itself is not really interested in getting involved. And the Trump administration wasn't really happy with that. But then there was also some pushback from the Italian government over some remarks Trump made about the Pope. I don't think we talked about this. Did you hear about this?
No. What do you say about the Pope?
He got in a fight with the fucking Pope. The Pope, I think 2 weeks ago, issued some bland statement that was anti-war.
Mm-hmm.
Just generic anti-war statement from the Pope, which is what every Pope does whenever they comment about any war.
Except the Crusades.
So, well, except the Crusades. But in the modern era, anyway, they always just kind of generically comment that war is bad, stop doing war, whatever. And generally, they call for some kind of international negotiations or mediation or what have you to resolve existing conflicts. But no, it's just banal stuff. It's the kind of stuff you'll read about on like the back page of the newspaper. Nobody pays attention to it. But Trump took it personally And so he bitched out the Pope. He went on to Truth Social and issued some statements accusing him of being a bad Pope and saying that he was, quote, weak on crime. Weird, weird stuff. That's the kind of thing that you say about a politician, not the Pope.
What's the Pope's role in enforcing crime?
None. Like, it was totally non sequitur.
Is he the police chief of the Vatican?
I don't believe so. I'm sure he's technically in charge of the security forces there, but yeah, I don't think he manages it himself. It's not an issue in the Vatican, last I checked. So more just weird shit coming out of Trump because he takes things too personally. So the Pope, as you might imagine, is fairly popular in Italy, being an extremely Catholic country, and so the Prime Minister of Italy kind of felt obligated to some degree to push back on Trump's comments about the Pope. Mm-hmm. And so that led to Trump whining about Italy again.
So funny.
Well, that's one word for it.
Well, it fits that human tendency for a lot of people to hear a generic comment and then take that as a personal attack when it wasn't necessarily levied as so. And it's even funnier when it definitely wasn't meant as a personal attack. Because if the Pope wanted to critique Trump, they could just critique Trump directly. And to say a vaguely general anti-war statement, that could be directed toward Russia, could be directed toward the US, could be directed toward Iran, could be directed toward anybody who's actively in a war and fighting. So to need to defend the pursuit of war is kind of a... Okay.
Yeah, any other president would have just said nothing.
Yeah.
Like, even if they felt slighted, they would just let it go. There's no benefit to confronting the Pope.
Would you like to play back at the Pope?
C'est la vie. Sign of the times.
This Pope that we have right now is basically brand new, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the American dude.
Oh.
I think he's from Chicago or something like that. Yeah, some people in the United States have been upset at this Pope and the previous Pope for not really explicitly siding with conservatives in American culture wars. And I've seen commentary point out that it's not the Pope's job to do that, and that it's a weird thing to expect of them. Like, the Pope is its own position; they've got their own thing going on. They're not really an institution designed to, like, delve into other countries' politics like that. But let's see, home stretch now. So the GCC countries, as we kind of already discussed, have not really unified in response to the Iran conflict. I've seen different commentaries, different opinions in commentaries about this. I've seen people say that Iran has overplayed its hand and has inadvertently united the GCC against it. And then I've also seen people argue that the conflict has brought into question the utility of American security commitments in the region. So I don't really buy either of those arguments. I don't think there's really an alternative to American security commitments, at least not a viable one. But the GCC also was already united against Iran even before the conflict, so it seems weird to argue that Iran somehow created an anti-Iranian coalition that already existed. So I don't really buy either of those arguments. But I did read an interesting piece that argued that the conflict has not seen the degree of unity you might expect from a coalition of states that are pretty much unanimous in their concern about the potential threat that Iran poses to them. And in general, most of the states, specifically Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and well, I guess those would be the Saudis and the Bahrainis, are supportive of the U.S. conflict. They oppose Iran, but they would prefer the conflict end sooner rather than later. Obviously, it kind of puts them out not to be able to export all of the oil that they're capable of. Oman's position hasn't really changed. They've always tried to be neutral and sort of be the mediator in the region. But Qatar has been relatively dovish, more so than any other state in the region. And they've not really backed the Saudis or the Emiratis in their relatively hawkish positions and statements. And the Emiratis, meanwhile, are the most hawkish, and they've been very strident in their criticism of Iran, and have even demanded reparations, the unconditional reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. And they've pushed very hard for the United States and Israel to go hard on Iran in the conflict. So those are all fairly disparate positions. And the fact that Iran has actually attacked their territory hasn't really resulted in those positions changing. They've all just kind of solidified up around their pre-existing stance vis-a-vis Iran. So take a lot of the commentary that you read about the conflict's impact on the GCC with a grain of salt. It's not really fracturing, nor is it unifying. It's actually just mostly remaining as it was before the conflict. There's not really a lot of dramatic change there. And that's it for the Iran update. It's been pretty quiet otherwise. There has been some sniping back and forth between Washington and Tehran in the ongoing negotiations to try to reach a peace agreement. But there's not really a lot happening there. You know, there's a lot of performative bullshit happening in the negotiation. You know, one side will say they're walking away. Trump will say that he's rejecting agreements. Rejecting Iranian proposals, and etc. So it's hard to tell how much of that is serious and how much of it is just posturing in the negotiation. So I'm kind of withholding judgment until I see any kind of traction there. You know, some sign of where it's going and how much support it actually has within Iran and the United States. Until then, you can expect a lot of bullshit and fireworks from both the Trump administration and the Iranian government in the negotiations. We're not going to know what's happening there until something happens, basically. Excuse me.
You're excused.
Did I tell you I hurt my toe?
No? What happened?
This is really stupid. So you remember I'm building the new PC. That's an ongoing project. Mm-hmm. So I got the new monitor for it way back, months ago. And I kept it in its box. It's just sort of sitting next to the table here. And it's basically just waiting for me to get the case for the new computer and the other stuff, the paste for the CPU, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And I guess it was like a divine signal that I need to get my ass in gear and finish that. Because a couple days ago, I jammed my small toe on my right foot right into that fucker.
Oof.
Yeah. It may or may not be broken, but it definitely did some damage.
Ow.
So I've been doing a lot of hobbling for the past week on account of that.
Damn, well, I hope you heal quickly. Oops.
Yeah, here's hoping. But yeah, if I had finished the computer by now, then it would not have been on the floor. So I'll take that as a divine signal to get my ass in gear. I'll try to make some progress there.
Well, let us know. I'm excited to interview you once you've gotten to play a modern computer.
I'll probably use it to play something from 30 years ago.
Yep. This is the way.
That's what I've been doing that recently with Planescape Torment. It was, I think it was 90s release, something like that. It is nice to play something that just kind of works. There's no like lag or anything. Just very snappy. Well, we did get some new information about that shooter at the Hilton Hotel last week.
The correspondence center.
Yeah. Apparently, he's a teacher, and he doesn't have any history of violence or extremism. Just kind of a regular dude, by all accounts. Maybe we'll receive new information in the coming weeks, but for now, it seems to have just been like a normal dude for the most part. Assassination attempt notwithstanding.
Yeah.
He also released a manifesto, and it kind of made for odd reading. So the impetus for the attempt was apparently that he just couldn't really continue to allow, however you want to frame it, corrupt pedophiles to continue to speak for him, to represent him, etc. And so apparently he felt compelled to take violent action on that count. That seemed to be the only notable part of the manifesto, kind of speaking on motive. The rest of it was kind of apologies and a list of targets ranked by importance, basically. Like I said, it kind of made for weird reading. He also mocked security at the hotel. Apparently, he thought that was like weirdly bad, such that he could even think to do something like this. Yeah, apparently he ranked his targets by targets that he intended to go after, targets that were kind of acceptable collateral damage, and then those that he intended to avoid hurting as best possible. And then he apologized to friends, family, and anybody at the hotel who might be negatively affected by his actions. Yeah, a weird manifesto in so much as it's kind of mundane.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of manifestos tend to be really incoherent, rambling, but this one just seems kind of, mundane by comparison. Kind of an odd case study. The commentariat has labeled him another quote-unquote normie assassin, sort of in the Mangione vein. Seems to be some trend there. So we'll see what new information comes out about him, but overall, just another random guy who snapped, maybe? It's not entirely clear what the real impetus was beyond what was stated in the manifesto. Let's see, we did the Iran update. Yeah, not a whole lot of other drama to get into. Did we have any questions? I think I saw two.
There were some earlier.
Confirm correct email. Yeah, that looks right. Something not getting through. Maybe it's blocking it as spam or something. Let me check to make sure that's right. That should be correct. Gmail is loading very slowly. There it goes. Oh, maybe not. There. Oh yeah, I see something now. April 29th. Yeah, that definitely wasn't there before. Huh. Well, let me check the email. John, yeah. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't go through before or what the deal was. But I do see something now from 29th.
Nice.
Let's see. The mid-decade Texas redistricting that's been in the news started under the Biden administration and was on hold due to legal battles. I understand why the left-leaning media wouldn't want to explain this was not started under the Trump administration, but why would the right-leaning media not cover it as well? Is there an advantage to hiding how this started much earlier than most people expect? I think media, partisan media specifically, prefers more dramatic angles in stories. And that's not a very dramatic story in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, it is true that it started under the Biden administration, but like, what kind of narrative can you spin with that? Yeah, I think one of the mistakes people make when they want to try to understand politics and kind of get involved in political discourse is they try to listen to both sides, quote unquote, and then kind of split the difference. And, I've said it before and I'll say it again, that's not really a good way to understand issues, because there's a lot of stuff that both sides will not talk about because it does not benefit either one. Sometimes it's because they technically both maybe agree on something, and so it's not worth talking about, but it's also possible that there's just no benefit to getting into it. Some particular angle of an existing issue, or maybe something that could be an issue, but that won't be because neither one really wants to get into it. Stuff like that is excluded from the conversation entirely, such that it's absent. So if your only exposure to political discourse is what the two major political factions or coalitions or parties are, you're not really getting a full picture. That's one of the big benefits to getting a formal education, because you do get a bigger picture, not necessarily the full one, but you'll get something more than what you'll get just from listening to political discourse. And keep in mind also, if you're getting your news from partisan outlets, like a lot of the political discourse between partisans, either politicians or pundits, a lot of that is kayfabe. A lot of that is the rhetorical equivalent of the World Wrestling Federation. It's meant more for entertainment and show than it is about informing people who are watching. So I would especially be wary of that. So because political discourse is sort of engineered that way, there's really not a lot of benefit to giving a fully accurate picture. So from the left-wing perspective, you want to try to emphasize that redistricting, you want to link redistricting as much as possible with Trump. But the right-wing perspective, why wouldn't you want it to be linked with Trump? You support it. It's to your benefit to redistrict. And Trump is popular. So if you've got something you want to be popular and a relatively popular president, popular with your base, then why challenge that? It doesn't really benefit you from a political perspective. So redistricting is not happening because of Trump, but there's reasons why both major political partisan outlets, broadly speaking, are not really pointing that out. It's one of those examples of something that falls by the wayside. So I guess the long story short here, make sure you're getting your news from nobody's objective, but try to get your news from a range of sources that are not partisan, or that are at least as objective as possible. And try to do your own research, your own reading, etc., so that you can kind of get the big picture view, so that you can catch those items that none of the major political actors are going to talk about. Those aspects that kind of give broader perspective and framing that you would not otherwise get from a partisan outlet of any kind. Does that make sense, or am I rambling?
Makes sense to me.
That's all we had for questions. I did have a couple of corrections, so I guess we could do those.
Sure.
Let's see. So this is pronunciation stuff. So apparently I was mispronouncing Manichaean. I was pronouncing it Manichaean, so my mistake. Or Manichean, that's okay. I was saying Manichean, but the correct pronunciation is Manichaean. And then I was also mispronouncing archipelago, which is apparently correctly pronounced archipelago. That's going to be a hard one to remember.
Archipelago. Yeah, people don't say that word very often.
Well, when you just mispronounce something, it's not so bad, like just the way it sounds. But when you're misemphasizing syllables, that's even harder to correct, in my experience. So I will probably screw that up again. Yeah, misemphasized syllables are definitely one of my weak spots. And then I was talking about the president of Lebanon a couple weeks ago. And his name is not Aoun, it's pronounced On. So my mistake. Yeah, I had a couple other corrections for that. So I was mixing up presidents. You know, the current president is On, but I was thinking of a different On. The current On is Joseph On. But the On I was thinking about was Michael On. He had been president of Lebanon for some years, but he actually stepped down in 2022. And then the office of the presidency in Lebanon was actually vacant for several years, roughly from 2022 to 2025. And it was only in January 25 that the new On became president, Joseph On. And he's not related to the previous Michael On, to the previous president. It was especially confusing for me because Joseph On, the current sitting president, had been commander of the Lebanese armed forces before he became president, which is also a position that Michael On had held. So I had assumed they were the same person. So that's my mistake. I was unaware of the change. Also, Joseph On's coalition does not include Hezbollah anymore. Or sorry, did it again. Michael On's coalition does not include Hezbollah anymore. They had been allies, as I said last time, but they apparently broke up in 2022. And the current sitting president, Joseph On, does not have any kind of political allegiance or alliance with On. So I was mistaken when I said the current president was actually a Hezbollah ally. I had outdated information. So I think the context of that originally was we were talking about the ceasefire in Lebanon breaking down. And I was dubious that there would be significant traction on peace talks, certainly any kind of agreement that would involve disarming Hezbollah, because I thought the sitting president was actually technically a Hezbollah ally, even though he was Christian and of a different party. So that was mistaken. The current president is not, in fact, a Hezbollah ally, so that implies them that peace talks could well involve pressure on Hezbollah to disarm. I'm still dubious there will be a lot of traction on that because Hezbollah still has a lot of pull in Lebanon. But in so much as there's going to be resistance to that, it's going to be from Hezbollah and not also from the president of Lebanon. So thank you all for the corrections. Always appreciated. Actually, that's a good cue for the usual disclaimer. I'm not an expert in everything I talk about on here. I have more of a background in economics and foreign policy. So if I ever say anything wrong, stupid, or biased, please do let me know. If I'm wrong, I want to know more than anybody. So participation from chat is encouraged in that regard. I don't read chat while we do this, but I do read it later on. And we do appreciate the feedback we get on here. Well, I did trip over a couple questions in the chat. They didn't make it in. Sorry, what?
In the YouTube or the Twitch?
In the Twitch. I was going through the Twitch chat log or history, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And I found a couple questions that didn't make it into our questions list here.
Oh, sure.
So let's see. Hi, new to the community. Do you have a personal bio somewhere? Can you speak of the epistemological frameworks you use to understand the world, e.g. sociology, poli-sci, etc.? I thought that was kind of an interesting question. So I don't really have like a fixed framework. I guess maybe the closest you could come is academic, but that's not like a coherent thing, right? I was in grad school for 7-8 years, and I tended to dabble in different things because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so the result is I would take a class on one field, take a class on another field. And what I found in each one is that the more you study individual fields and actually kind of dig into the details of how something like foreign policy or national security or what have you work, a lot of the public's popular perceptions about those issues and fields kind of fall apart pretty quickly. So my takeaway was that if you're going to try to learn about something in one of those fields, you have to be rigorous. You know, you kind of need to be detailed and get the sort of nuances in order to kind of have something to say about it, you know, in order to properly critique government policy. And I did get like a degree in public policy, so that's not me entirely talking out of my ass. So in so much as I have a coherent framework there, it's just trying to be skeptical, trying to be rigorous, trying to understand enough of the details to do a proper critique. But beyond that, I don't have like a single field or framework that I apply. I just try to remember what I read and studied back in the day and try to do good reading in the present. I know I try to have a relatively enriched media diet so that I can have good information, or at least relatively good information. You know, as Neuro has pointed out, like no source is completely unbiased. You just kind of have to account for it as best you can. So that's maybe not the most satisfying answer. Like there's not really any one easy trick, like to trying to study public policy, global affairs, etc., you know, economic issues, that's going to give you like the big picture. And realistically speaking, you can study it in detail for your entire life and you will still not learn everything. There's still going to be stuff that surprises you. There's always going to be more to read about, learn about, etc. So trying to be an expert is kind of an effort in perpetual learning. Like being an expert means you understand that you're never going to be an expert, basically, to put it another way. You're always going to be learning new things, learning how you were wrong, etc., and correcting accordingly. And that's just going to last forever. That's going to be your whole life. That's going to be your whole experience, trying to learn as much as you can about whatever field or interest you're trying to specialize in. There's not going to be like a satisfying catharsis where you're like, I am now a master. I am now the leader of this field. You know, there's not going to be that sort of end point. You know, the reality is there is no end point. It's just going to be you constantly learning and unlearning and learning again over and over again until you die or quit or retire.
This is the way.
Let's see. Did you see an RAF Typhoon Eurofighter shot down a Russian drone, I think over or near Ukraine? So I had not heard that story, and so after in the past week, after last Sunday, I tried to look into it. So what I found is that there was a Russian drone, which was apparently part of a swarm of 15 Russian drones that crashed. The swarm did not crash in. Rather, one of the drones in the swarm crashed in Romania, in some particular town. And this would have been April 25th in my notes here. So it destroyed a house extension and an electricity pole. And there were 2 Royal Air Force Eurofighters that were deployed to Romania, basically to just show solidarity in response to the perceived Russian aggression in Ukraine. And these were apparently mobilized to intercept the drones that were approaching Romanian airspace. But what I read is that they did not actually engage the drone that penetrated Romanian airspace. So they were mobilized, they were on site, but they didn't actually shoot down anything. I also read that they were authorized to engage the drones, but did not. So they were there, had authorization, but for whatever reason, didn't shoot it down. Okay. Well, that's all we have for questions, so if there's nothing you wanted to get to and we didn't have any more questions, then I'm just going to start doing random bullshit, basically.
Random bullshit time.
Random bullshit time. Have you ever heard of Turkmenistan?
Yes.
You have?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what did you know about it? Or what have you heard about it?
I know that it's in the steppe region of Central Asia. That's about it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot more than probably most people have heard about it. It's one of those very obscure countries that very rarely receives any attention. Purposely so. The government has very purposely kind of closed the country off. Not completely, but they've been very isolationist since they achieved independence. So it's just one of those quiet corners of the globe as a result. It used to be a part of the Soviet Union, so it is a former Soviet republic. And correspondingly, the political elite in Turkmenistan is still Russophone. I think that's the correct term. They speak Russian. They also speak the native Turkmen language, but Russian is sort of the language of administration, government, etc. It's also very common for the well-off in Turkmenistan and in their urban areas to use Russian language media, social media, consume Russian media of one kind or another, etc. So it is kind of still part of the Russosphere, so to speak, to a degree. Not as much as certain other countries in the region, like, say, Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan, but they are still in that cultural region. But there has been, some shift in the culture towards more indigenous culture since 1991, when Turkmenistan became independent. But the government, anyway, is populated by older guys, and a lot of them either have roots themselves in the Soviet system or are still heavily influenced by Soviet political culture. So correspondingly, the Turkmen government is very authoritarian. They didn't even lean into partial liberalization like some of the other authoritarian former Soviet republics did. They stuck with one-party state, did not allow political competition, and even cultivated a cult of personality with their first post-independence leader. He was a guy who called himself Turkmenbashi, which I believe means father of the Turkmen. And he did a bunch of crazy bullshit, renamed months of the year after himself, built a big statue of his dog, eccentric dictator type stuff. And he kind of was able to get away with that because Turkmenistan is basically a petro state. It depends disproportionately on the export of oil and natural gas. And so that, of course, gives the government a source of revenue separate from, the usual sources of tax revenue that normally rely on a tax base comprised of the upper middle class, workers to a lesser degree, businesses, etc. Generally, you have to be at least marginally responsible as a government when you have to tax those people, because people get real pissy if you start fucking around with their money. But if you could just get money from, energy royalties of one kind or another, you don't have to worry about that as much. So that kind of opens the door to a greater degree of fuckery than would otherwise be plausible. So in Turkmenistan's case, the government took full advantage of that. There was quite a bit of eccentric dictator nonsense that resulted for, I want to say, like 20 years. I think Turkmenbashi ran Turkmenistan from 91 up until 2021, something like that. I can fact check that. Let me look. But it was several decades. And there was some hope that the new guy who took over after he died might moderate a little bit. But by and large, that didn't really happen. They did shift away from the cult of personality nonsense, but the new government remained very, very authoritarian, and Turkmenistan retained a very isolationist foreign policy. But I did see an item in the news this past week that suggests that the Turkmenistan government is going to start opening up. Presumably not fully, but they're going to start loosening up visa regimes, access to foreign media, foreign internet, etc. So as a result, if they do follow through with that, you could be hearing more about Turkmenistan in the future. Because if they do want to open up and try to make Turkmenistan more attractive for foreign investment, they're probably going to do some kind of media blitz. You've kind of seen some countries like Saudi Arabia, for example, try to rehabilitate their international image by funding media operations of one kind or another that kind of get the country out into places like TikTok, YouTube, etc. So it would not surprise me in the least if Turkmenistan did something similar. It's actually a really small country. I think it's only 6 million people, something like that. Yeah, it was definitely one of the less populated Soviet republics back in the day. And the population, as I recall, is heavily concentrated on the coast. I want to say the West Coast, which makes sense since that's where most of the energy is. I guess you could say it's a very Caspian country in that sense. People kind of forget about the Caspian Sea, Neuro. It is its own strategic asset. I think Americans in particular kind of discount it because it's one of those very few large bodies of water that the US Navy can't get to.
Is it landlocked?
Yeah.
Oh.
It is not connected to the broader ocean, the Atlantic or the Pacific or what have you. It's isolated. Technically, it is possible to go by sea from the Caspian Sea to the Black Sea, but you have to use a series of canals the Russians constructed that link the Volga River with the Don River, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, they keep tight control of that, so it's not a readily accessible route if you're not Russian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Caspian is a really important energy corridor because a lot of the energy that Central Asian states depend on economically is actually extracted from territory in or near the Caspian Sea. Azerbaijan, for example, gets a lot of its natural gas from Caspian reserves that they then export and then forms the backbone of their economy. And it's very useful strategically because, again, if you want to export stuff to, say, Iran, if it were, for example, blockaded, the Caspian Sea represents an alternative route that you can use. And for what I was reading, Iran has been taking advantage of that. I was also thinking, sorry, what?
So today I learned.
Yeah, I was thinking in the past week that the Caspian Sea, like as a strategic theater, for example, I don't recall that ever being discussed during the Cold War. Obviously, I wasn't alive for most of it, but I mean, I haven't read anything about it being discussed during the Cold War. So the Soviet Union, when it still existed, encompassed like most of the Caspian Sea coastline, except for the southern coast, which was Iranian, and Iran was an American ally. So presumably there would have been some kind of planning for a contingency in which the Soviets and the Iranians fought each other. Presumably that would have involved the Caspian Sea as a major theater. But I have no idea what that contingency planning would have looked like, because again, I've never read anything about it. So I think that would be interesting. If anybody has any recommendations on reading, I would be interested. Have you ever heard of the Caspian Sea monster?
No? Is it related to the Loch Ness Monster?
It is not.
Okay.
It's much cooler than the Loch Ness Monster. It's actually a kind of aircraft. It takes advantage of what's called the wing and ground effect. Chat, keep me honest on that. I might be misremembering that, but I think that's what it's called. So basically, it's a big troop transport vehicle. And it is technically an aircraft in so much as it flies, but it doesn't fly very high. It's just a couple meters over the water. And the way it flies is not by the traditional mechanism that aircraft use. It relies, again, on the wing and ground effect, which is a sort of weird effect that happens when aircraft approach the ground at a particular speed and angle. I don't remember all of the science behind it. You'd have to look it up. But it did work. And the result is that there was this big giant troops transport that was the size of a hovercraft, but could fly at the speed of an airplane. So much faster than a normal troop transport. I remember learning about it way back when I was going through an aviation phase as a kid. I had all of the Jane's cards. Jane's had a series of aviation fold-out cards that you could collect, and Caspian Sea Monster was one of them. It's a interesting artifact of the Cold War. I don't think anybody since then has done anything with that particular design. Even the Russians themselves, I think, ended up canceling the project because it just wasn't economical. You know, it was a very niche plane. There really wasn't anything you could use it for other than transporting troops very quickly. But the circumstances in which you could land troops amphibiously without any opposition, and circumstances in which you would need to do that quickly, so much so that you would need an aircraft like that, that was so niche that it became just clear that they would almost certainly never end up using it. So that and the fact that it was big and expensive led to it getting canceled, as I understand it. But to tie this back to the Caspian, if you think about the Caspian Sea as a potential theater of operations in some kind of Cold War conflict between the Soviet Union and Iran, the Caspian Sea Monster makes a lot more sense. Because hypothetically, you could imagine a scenario where the Soviet Navy wanted to land troops very quickly on the northern Caspian coast of Iran. So in that niche potential scenario, the Caspian Sea Monster would have been very useful. So I would hypothesize that this is exactly the case that it was originally designed around. Because I don't really know where else you could use it. Maybe the Black Sea against Turkey. But that seems kind of unlikely since the Soviet Navy had a big presence there. I guess it had a big presence in the Caspian too, so maybe that doesn't matter. But yeah, the Caspian scenario makes more sense to me than the Black Sea.
Geography-specific aircraft. Pretty cool. That's so you know they won't steal the plans for your plane, as it's not even good where they live. How's Southeast Asia doing?
Pretty quiet. Don't think I had anything in my notes for them. It's a fairly well-behaved region these days. Lots of economic growth. It is kind of emerging as a region with its own identity, although it's still pretty nascent. I think we talked a couple months ago about Saudi Arabia hosting a big international gaming competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking through the list of games that were going to be involved in the competition. And, there's a lot of well-known Chinese games, there's a lot of well-known Western games, but there was a number of them that I didn't recognize at all. I just never heard of them before. And it turned out that almost all of that group of games were Southeast Asian in origin. So they don't just enjoy gaming now on account of them being relatively young and upwardly mobile, as a region. But also they've got their own gaming ecosystem now. They're producing their own stuff that their population is playing and enjoying kind of without other regions of the world necessarily knowing about it. I'm sure there's people in the United States that know of Southeast Asian games, but as far as I know, there's not a lot of people that play those games. I don't think they have a big base here. I guess you could say that's evidence that as the world develops economically, we're going to end up with more and more siloed communities like that online. Like when I was growing up, there was sort of a singular global online community. And you had pockets that were more region specific, but for the most part, everybody kind of gamed together because there just wasn't that many gamers. Mm-hmm. But as the base of gamers globally has increased, it's not just that they fractured into different servers, more and more niche servers. It's also that the games they play themselves have become more regional and niche. Mm. So instead of everybody playing Dota, now everybody plays a region-specific Dota. That's an exaggeration, but that's the direction we seem to be heading.
There is some truth to that in the sense that for any country, it's going to have some leaning toward League of Legends or Dota. There are certain countries that are really strong in the Dota scene, and they basically don't have a League presence, and vice versa. I think South Korea is a country that's very strong in League of Legends and relatively weak in Dota.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that's what ended up being more popular there.
Yeah, beyond that, I don't have any other updates on Southeast Asia. At least nothing's coming to mind. Pretty much on trend for the most part. Thailand is still getting used to its new government. Indonesia is still trying to figure out what the fuck their government is doing. Mm-hmm. Overall, it's doing fine. Indonesia's government is not doing anything explicitly badly, but I think there's some concern about whether or not the Prabowo government is actually going to fully respect the democratic norms that have emerged and have been established since democratization in the 1990s. So in so much as there's discussion, it's about that, but I don't think there's any specific item in the past week in that vein.
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam has new leadership too. That was Tam Lo, I think his name was. Yeah, he's a former secret policeman, basically. He's been a little bit paranoid since he kind of came in. He actually expanded his power recently, I think last year. So he's not just the general secretary of the Communist Party in Vietnam. Now he's also the president, I think. Those are actually separate positions. Historically speaking, in Vietnam, the only guy who has held both the presidency and the general secretary position has been Ho Chi Minh, sort of the founding father of modern Vietnam. Nobody else has been bold enough to try to make a play for both positions until this guy. So he seems to be consolidating his power within Vietnam's political system. And that was formalized at the last big meetup of the party. And the reason I say that he's been acting paranoid is because a lot of the restrictions that are normally placed on politicians who are participating in that Congress were way more restrictive than normal last year. Unusually so. So I don't know if that's indicative of some kind of internal instability within the party. Maybe he doesn't feel like his hold on power is that strong. Or maybe that's just a reflection of institutional bias. You know, he was a Secret Service guy, not a Secret Service, he was a secret policeman. So that's kind of a paranoid position. And presumably, if you work in that kind of work for a long time, it probably starts to affect your perception of the world. Mm-hmm. And he's known for being ambitious. Like he's definitely a social climber of a kind. So it seems like he's the kind of guy that would consolidate power and mitigate any and all risks as much as possible. That seems to be what he's going for. Doesn't really seem to be doing a lot else. I haven't heard of any like major reform efforts in Vietnam. I think I had in my notes somewhere that he did implement one administrative reform that resulted in a number of cuts. That was partly an effort to scale down bureaucracy to get the economy running again. It's been doing well, but it did take a dip over the past couple years, partly just due to COVID. But I've also read that the administrative cuts are also about consolidating power. So it's not necessarily just about opening up the economy. So anybody's guess what, you know, this guy's real governing philosophy is. For now, he's mostly just focused on himself and his hold on power. Doesn't seem to have a lot of time for anything else. Malaysia still has its reform government, which doesn't seem able to do any reforms. So they've been out of the news for the wrong reasons on that count. It would be better to actually do something and then make the news for that. Singapore continues to just kind of tread along. They're doing fine. They benefited a lot from all the drama between the United States and China. Nobody cares or knows about Brunei, so East Timor is in a similar category. I think that's about all of them. Burma's still mired in civil war. That hasn't changed. I don't have any civil war updates. That's about it. I guess Cambodia and Laos, but yeah, there's no new developments there as far as I've heard. They don't really make the news as much as the other guys in the region.
Mm-hmm. How's the Sudanese civil war going?
It's still going pretty strong. The RSF, which is one of the major factions in the civil war, has mostly been focusing on consolidating its position in Darfur, which is the westernmost province in Sudan, and also their main constituency, their main base of operations and support. They started doing that last year when they got kicked out of Khartoum. Khartoum is the capital and largest city in Sudan, and the civil war actually started in Khartoum. And there was virtually continuous fighting in the city for several years, up until last year when the Sudanese army was finally able to successfully expel the RSF from the city. So the Battle of Khartoum was one of those gnarly battles that just didn't make the news much in the West, but which will probably have like a really good movie made about it at some point, or maybe a really good book. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of drama there. Easily one of, if not the largest urban battle in the past 20 years. So the Battle of Khartoum ended, the RSF was expelled, and there followed a general army offensive that pushed them out of much of the center of Sudan. And so the result is that the RSF started consolidating its lines in Darfur, and then also in a province called South Kordofan, if I'm not mistaken. North and South Kordofan together comprise Sudan's breadbasket. And that's basically where the front line is right now. That's where the bulk of the fighting is happening, as I understand it. But as that fighting is ongoing, the RSF is also taking the opportunity to expel the Sudanese army from the last few positions it's held in Darfur since the conflict started. That's what I mean when I say consolidating power in Darfur. There were a couple of, I don't want to say fortress cities, but just regular cities that the army had been holding on to. And they'd basically been under siege for several years. And last year, the RSF was finally able to successfully take those cities. I think El Fashir was one of them. It didn't make the news too much in the West, but when the cities fell, there was a lot of coverage in human rights news coverage of a lot of, well, the alleged atrocity that the RSF allegedly committed after the city fell, which was basically to massacre a good chunk of the population. I don't think there was ever any footage of it, but human rights monitors of one kind or another did have satellite footage of mass graves and piles of bodies, that kind of thing.
Damn.
So in general, the army seems to have the momentum, but I haven't heard any big updates. So presumably they're still mired in the Kordofan provinces. I've heard some rumors that the RSF may try to negotiate independence for Darfur with themselves as the new government. But that's a non-starter, as I understand it, for the Sudanese army, which is not willing to humor that. They may not have a choice. The RSF is technically being backed by the Emiratis, so it may not be possible for the army to successfully defeat them to the point where they're able to retake control of Darfur. So in that case, the conflict could become a frozen conflict where Darfur's status is not really resolved for like 10, 20 years until the conflict goes hot again. Or alternatively, the Emiratis successfully use their leverage to basically force the Sudanese government to give up Darfur. More likely, they just keep fighting for another however long, 5, 10 years, whatever, until one of the other sides just collapses from exhaustion and then the other side moves into the vacuum. Basically a Syria scenario.
Mm.
What else is good here? I did have an item from Brazil. So apparently Brazil's Congress voted to reduce Jair Bolsonaro's sentence. He had been convicted for allegedly plotting to prevent Lula da Silva from taking office after he beat Bolsonaro in the last big presidential election. Mm-hmm. So I think his sentence was something like 30 years, something to that effect. Oh, sorry, 27 years. He was sentenced to 27 years after he was convicted for plotting to overthrow the government. And Congress, which is majority conservative, in case you can't guess, reduced that sentence to just 2 years. Probably related to the election coming up. He's not going to be able to run, but his son is running. I actually don't have his son's name in front of me. But presumably Congress did that to, one, kind of get the base excited, and then also probably because of internal political shenanigans. Brazil's politics is more than a little bit corrupt, so some hands may have been greased to make that happen. But the takeaway is that Jair Bolsonaro will be out of prison in 2 years, thereabouts. So it's conceivable he could run for president again. He'll at least be out of jail anyway.
And I guess the same people who liked Bolsonaro would like his son's policies. They're not too different.
Yeah, the son is kind of just considered an avatar of the father, effectively. Basically running Jair's party while he's in jail. So not necessarily his own man, per se.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I did have a China note, too. They, I might have mentioned this last time, I apologize if so, but China implemented an agreement with Africa to reduce all tariffs on African goods to zero. With one exception, Eswatini, but that's just because Eswatini still recognizes Taiwan, so they don't get the benefit of this. But everybody else in Africa now has pretty much full access to China's market, at least in so much as tariffs are involved. The tariffs are zero, so there's no barrier in that sense. Still plenty of non-tariff barriers, I'm sure, but tariffs, not an issue. 0%. Yeah, mostly that'll probably be natural resources affected by that, so African exporters of those to China, of which there are many, will be able to keep more of their money. But in so much as there's any manufacturing in Africa, they'll especially benefit because that is a large market to have ready access to. Probably nothing too fancy like cars or advanced manufacturing, but light manufacturing is more probable. Maybe something like food processing or textiles. Those are all viable exporters who could benefit to greater access to China's market. I've seen it commented on a lot in terms of strategic competition with the United States. Because whenever developing countries go to Washington and ask for some kind of assistance in order to offset China's economic influence, the response from Washington has almost always been one of two things. One, threats, or alternatively, two, they say that those governments just need to make their countries more attractive to American private sector investment. So as you can imagine, neither of those are really attractive propositions for any government. The threats obviously are not great because no government wants to be seen to be getting bullied.
It seems like the responses are either one, be better, or two, how dare you?
Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. But even just telling them, make your country more attractive to investment, that often comes with reforms that are going to be politically unpopular. So that makes them very difficult to do. They would prefer to just get aid or some other form of assistance. That's the most politically expedient way to do that. But Washington generally is not game for that. So that's resulted in China getting kind of a leg up because the Chinese government obviously is much more proactive in its diplomacy than the United States has been for the past, God, like 20 years, maybe since the end of the Cold War even. The United States has not really had a clear strategic objective in its foreign policy for a long time. There's no grand strategy, in other words. I think that's something else we've kind of talked about before. So that's made American foreign policy a little bit incoherent and certainly ineffective. China doesn't really suffer for that, so as a result, they find it much easier to reach out and try to build ties through more traditional means, aid, transferring money, material support, etc. So this move by China to reduce tariffs to zero for Africa goods, it's seen as yet another example of them being much more proactive diplomatically than the United States, because as far as I know, Washington has not responded to this. There is no move by Washington to try to offset what will be an increase in trade between Africa and China.
It seems like that might be a future thing that happens on a larger scale, is as Africa has like more stable countries with less conflict and also just better standards of corruption and so on, that'll be a major place for a lot of investment. I think the population in the world is going up the most in Africa of anyone, out of any of the continents.
Yep, that's correct. Fastest growing demographically continent, I believe, on the planet. Yeah, you kind of have to balance that against South Asia, though, because I think there's as many young people in South Asia as there are in all of sub-Saharan Africa, if not Africa as a whole. So the future definitely partly belongs to Africa, but it also partly belongs to South Asia. But yeah, you're correct. It's growing very quickly, demographically, and I think also economically. That obviously varies pretty considerably depending on the country, but overall, Africa has done pretty well for itself over the past couple decades. Did you want to talk about the Chagos Archipelago?
Archipelago?
Yeah.
Sure.
That feels so unnatural. That's so hard to say. It's going to take a long time to get used to that. So yeah, there's been some drama with the Chagos Islands, let's call them. For those not familiar with these islands, they're a very strategically located set of islands, almost right smack in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's technically a British territory, but the British have been leasing some of the islands to the United States so that it can build military bases on them for more than half a century now. I think the U.S. started doing it during or just after World War II. Now, the issue is that a lot of the native islanders were expelled during and after World War II so that the British could basically just turn it into a military redoubt. And they have not appreciated that. They have gone to both British courts and international courts demanding that the British government restore them to their home islands. Because most of them basically just ended up being relocated to other islands nearby, or were relocated to the United Kingdom itself, which wasn't too big a deal because there were very few of them. It's not a big set of islands. So they'd gone to court repeatedly asking to be returned. No court sided with them. In the past couple decades, an island country called, I believe, Mauritius, if I'm not mistaken, located in the Indian Ocean, which had been itself a British territory, had argued from very early on after its independence that the Chagos Islands belonged to them properly. And like the native islanders, they had gone to court many, many times, arguing as much, demanding that the British government hand it over. And the British government refused time and time again, national security imperative and all that. But in the past decade, there was an international court. I don't remember, something related to the UN, I think. Basically, the British were sued, and the plaintiffs actually won. And basically, it was won on anti-colonial grounds. The argument was that the British were colonizing the Chagos Islands illegally, and that they needed to rectify it immediately. And so that set in motion a series of events that culminated in a negotiation between the British government and the government of Mauritius, in which the British agreed to hand over the islands in exchange for Mauritius giving them it was like a 99-year lease or something to that effect, so that the British could continue operating their military bases on the island. And that lease, as I recall, encompassed U.S. access to the island as well. So the Trump administration really did not like this. They much preferred that the British themselves just hang on to the islands. But the British government made the point that by treaty, it was obligated by the court rulings that had happened in relation to this case to rectify the colonization issue. And mind you, the current prime minister of the UK is a former human rights lawyer. So likely he has kind of personal investment in respecting that court ruling. So the British government went forward with it. They did, what's the word I want? They did communicate the deal with the American government. It's not something that they just kind of surprised them with. They kind of moved forward with the negotiation in consultation with the US government. And then afterwards, when they reached a final agreement, they also consulted the US government about that final agreement. And the Biden administration was okay with it. They kind of gave the go-ahead. Trump administration very much did not like the agreement, but grudgingly gave them the go-ahead early on. But since then, Trump himself has apparently had a change of mind, and he started putting more and more pressure on the British to rescind the agreement, to basically just pull out completely. The British government, as it is right now, does not like that. They want to move forward with the agreement, and so there's been a tiff between Washington and London over this. So the British government did give the US the concession of putting the deal on hold. It has not been fully canceled, but it's not moving forward either until Washington and London can kind of clarify their respective positions and reach some kind of mutual agreement on the path forward. And I thought it was notable that the Maldives actually made a play, I think last year.
Maldives?
For the Maldives, thank you. For the Chagos Islands last year. So apparently the president, apparently the president of the Maldives met a pitch to Trump personally, actually personally met him, and argued that the Chagos Islands should be given to the Maldives. And he apparently argued that if the United States supported that, then the president of the Maldives would guarantee that the United States would continue to have access to its military base in the Chagos Islands in perpetuity. So I don't think the U.S. government did, or at least if it did, I haven't heard any evidence to that effect. But I thought it was a pretty bold move by the president of the Maldives to try to take advantage of Trump's transactional nature there and potentially get some islands for his country.
I thought of a super sweet improvement to that pitch that would get Trump to say yes right away. They could say, instead of you can continue to have access to this airbase, we will make a large golden statue of you. He would be like, oh yeah, for sure.
There you go. Right up his alley.
Yep. I wonder how many countries are maybe starting to pre-plan stuff after this presidency, because I would assume that the U.S. would swing back toward the mean, some regression toward the mean for our next executive. It's possible that we don't, Like,
Yeah.
it could go more in this direction. So anyone who's biding their time could be surprised and upset. But I would think that it would go kind of more back to normal. But I don't know how.
Don't jinx it, Neuro.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, to what degree do other countries around the world expect the U.S. government to sort of turn back into Dr. Jekyll after 8-some years of being Mr. Hyde? Hedging seems to be the preferred approach right now, because you'll note that very few countries have just openly and explicitly broken with the United States government, even with Trump being Trump. Because the United States is a powerful entity in global affairs, and there's a lot of benefits to maintaining trade and security ties. But that said, if Trump is the model going forward, then you have to hedge, like way more than they have thus far, because that's just not a stable partner. Like, Trumpian America is not a stable partner economically or in terms of security. You just can't really rely on them. And I think the main reason there hasn't been a more notable substantive break with America's traditional partners is specifically because they think Trump is more of an anomaly, that it is entirely possible that there could be a regression to mean. And probably also they're hoping that it regresses to mean, because if the United States does just go full rogue, then that's going to have severe knock-on effects to the stability of global affairs. Like, the United States is just too big and central a country in the international system, however you want to define that, to be this crazy. Like, the United States government really has to be the responsible partner here in international affairs, because it is sort of the lodestone that holds up the international system. Partly by design, partly just by nature of its huge-ass economy. The United States is critical to the functioning of the international system. So if the United States goes rogue, then everybody's kind of fucked, almost no matter what, and they will have to dramatically change their foreign policy and hedge significantly against potential U.S. malfeasance in the future. As is, there has been some hedging, but it's been pretty minor. It's more preparing to hedge or taking minor hedging moves, but nothing explicitly dramatic, as of yet anyway. But we'll see. We'll see what we get in 28. That's still 2 years away, so there's plenty of time for the current administration to, who's to say, maybe they'll get better. Maybe they'll start acting normal. Or maybe they get worse. I think everybody just kind of expects them to get worse at this point, but we'll see. As is, the damage that's been done thus far is still recoverable. Things can still be rebuilt. We are not so far removed from the status quo, the normal status quo of American foreign policy, that we cannot sort of retrieve it.
I see. I know you can be a mayor of a town as a dog. Can you be a president?
Sorry.
A dog can be a mayor of a town, correct? There are towns that have a dog as their mayor.
I thought I misheard. Sorry. But I was okay. Technically speaking, but I think it's like a ceremonial thing.
Ah.
Yeah, I don't think they actually let the dog like full on
govern, yeah.
Yeah. I think I don't remember the details. It's been too long. But yeah, there is some kind of like funky custom somewhere where they kind of do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would vote for the dog. I think we did get a couple more questions here.
Go ahead.
Can you ask me about the Antonov 225 Maria? It's not a question, but a wild Soviet plane. Have you ever heard of the Maria?
I don't think so.
It was the largest airplane on the planet. Basically just a huge-ass cargo plane. Looks pretty similar in overall design to Antonov's other cargo planes, so it's a little nondescript, but yeah, just in terms of raw size, it's absolutely massive. Yeah, they used it to do ultra-heavy cargo, as I recall. I think it was destroyed at the beginning of the Ukraine conflict. Pretty sure the Russians bombed it at one point. But I think a couple years later, the Ukrainian government announced that they were going to try to either repair it or rebuild it. One or the other. So I don't know how that effort is going. I think they only ever had the one. I don't think they had like a backup, but maybe I'm wrong. Definitely a cool plane, though. The Russians love to build huge-ass helicopters and planes. I think the record for largest helicopter is held by a Russian design. Some funky experimental thing. Yeah, you want to look it up sometime. It's like bizarrely huge. You would not think a helicopter could be that big.
Everything is a competition. Got to beat those Yankees at it, you know. They've got big planes too.
Oh, yeah. Too true. Although we never designed a Mach 3. No, not Mach 3. We never designed a supersonic passenger plane in the United States. And the Soviets did. So they actually kind of beat us on that. I think Boeing was working on one at one point, but they ended up scrapping it. So the only Western equivalent of the Soviet design was the Concorde, which did come first. The Concorde came before the Soviet equivalent. So the Europeans, you could say, beat both the United States and the Soviets in that sense. And it's too bad they got rid of the Concorde. That was another cool plane. Just too damned expensive, as I understand it.
Yeah, I think the fueling of it was very expensive. My grandma took a flight on one. I think it was in New York to London.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
What was it like?
She said it was very loud.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another one of the common complaints from Concorde passengers. Just loud as fuck. Couldn't really be helped. If you're going to go supersonic, you're going to make some noise.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they had to make room for passengers created a lot of engineering difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were able to square a lot of them, but the noise issue kind of persisted. Yeah, I think the Soviet supersonic passenger plane was a Tupolev, if I'm not mistaken. I'll defer to chat on that one. I don't remember the exact model number, but I think it was made by Tupolev. It's the same company that made the Bear bomber, the Tu-95. That's another fun one. You've almost certainly seen pictures of footage of a Tu-95 at one point or another. You can think of the 95 as the Soviet equivalent of the B-52 bomber.
Mm.
It's a big 4-engine intercontinental bomber. It's actually kind of funky though, because the B-52, right? It's got jet engines like you would expect.
Mm-hmm.
The 95 does not have jet engines. It's got turboprop engines with counter-rotating blades. Kind of an unusual design choice. And kind of like the Tupolev supersonic passenger plane, the Tu-95 is also loud as fuck, by all accounts.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a result of the turbojets. Or, sorry, not the turboprop, rather, I should say. Turboprop engines with counter-rotating blades. Yeah, you might not notice it if you see it in flight, but if you ever see one parked, the counter-rotating blades definitely stand out.
Sweet.
It's a very distinctive, cool design. You will not mistake a Tu-95 for anything else. There's nothing else that looks even remotely like it.
Iconic.
Yeah. Mostly intended to bomb Americans from across the Arctic, but I think they also repurposed a lot of them for maritime duty. Because it had such long range, it could fly deep into the Atlantic Ocean. And what they would do is they would put a huge ass search radar on the nose of it, and they would use it to try to seek out US or NATO fleets of one kind or another, especially the carrier battle groups. And the idea was that in the event of a conflict, they would know where they were, or they would be able to find them. And then they could deploy other aircraft or naval assets to try to intercept the NATO naval assets. Yeah, the Soviets designed a number of carrier-busting anti-ship missiles. They were big as fuck. Some of them, I think actually all of them, were the size of a city bus.
Oh.
Yeah, they didn't fuck around. They'd stick one or two of them under like a medium-range bomber. So they'd use the maritime model Tu-95s to find a target. When they had something, they'd vector in some Tu-22s or whatever was available. And they'd have one or two of these big, giant fucking anti-ship missiles under them. And they planned, anyway, in the event of a conflict, to fire them in volleys. So if there was ever some kind of fuck-up where the Soviets, in the event of a conflict, successfully found a aircraft carrier, that aircraft carrier would then have had to suffer an incoming volley of city bus-sized anti-ship missiles.
Damn.
Yeah. Let's see. Can we ask if I finally got a new mouse pad? Not yet. I'm trying to decide whether I should use the $30 to get like a nice $30 mouse pad that will last a long time, or if I should just get multiple cheaper mouse pads.
I would say get two. Two is pretty good. One mouse pad can last you a pretty long amount of time, but if you spill something on it, it's can be a problem.
Yeah, I noticed. That's kind of what happened with my old one here.
Go for quality, says chat. So chat may sponsor another one if it fucks up. Okay, get a fancy one. Get a $30 mouse pad.
Get a third.
And tell us what you get.
Extravagant.
You've done a segment with us for over 10 years. You can have a fucking mouse pad.
Very well.
Get one with the graphic on it. Yeah, show us what you get, unless it's TOS, in which case, enjoy.
Yeah, I don't think the new one's going to have anime titties on it.
Okay. That's
so I think TOS will be respected in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the ones I was looking at was just like a bundle of, what was it? It was like a bundle of 3 mouse pads you could get for $8. They were just jet black, like no design pattern.
Get a mouse pad with a photograph of a different mouse pad on it. Yeah, that way you don't lose your nostalgia.
There you go.
Take a photo of your current mouse pad setup and then go to a website that lets you customize the mouse pad and do that.
There you go. Let's see. Have you heard about Chinese automaker BYD being removed from Brazil's list of ethically fraught companies, and Brazil's top labor inspector in charge being fired for trying to keep them on that list, or something like that? I've not heard about that. Doesn't really surprise me. China's a big investor in Brazil now, and BYD is almost certainly one of the bigger companies investing. So, yeah, probably they've got pretty good probably pretty good ties with people within the Brazilian government. Yeah, I still don't think electric cars are going to be as big a thing as people would like. Probably hybrids are going to end up taking off a lot more. The BYD is still expanding abroad anyway. You know, there's still a market for electric vehicles regardless. But yeah, I'd have to read about the story in question to have more to say than that. In general, Latin America has cultivated strong economic ties with China, not just because of the natural resources. Obviously, Latin America exports a lot of those. So inherently, China is going to be a major trade partner just because China is a major buyer. But they've also gone out of their way to try to make it easier for Chinese companies to operate in Latin America. So, for example, during the big scare about Huawei networking equipment back in the day, when the US government was trying to get governments around the world to bar the import of Chinese routers of one kind or another, Latin America was among the many regions that just refused to do that. Like, Chinese equipment was the cheapest on the market. Latin America is relatively poor. It made a lot more sense to them to maintain those ties.
I have firsthand experience with this going to Mexico to Cancun. Cancun has a mall. Malls have a lot of different fashion stuff, but they also have electronic stuff. Huawei, all over the place. And it stuck out to me because this was around a similar time to what you're talking about. So you wouldn't really see Huawei stuff in the US in stores.
No.
But at the mall there, it was definitely all over. Very prominent.
It's very common. They've got a good chunk of the market share over there. I think Chinese phones have done better as well. Chinese apps to a lesser degree, maybe. I don't know if we have anybody from Latin America in chat, but maybe they can elaborate just how extensive Chinese companies have penetrated into Latin American markets. But certainly they've been investing a lot over the past 10 years, some years. They've become major employers. And, you know, if you're a Latin American government, that's all to the better. That's all just more jobs for your workers. So why wouldn't you want that? But in turn, there have been some ethical questions. I think in BYD's case, there was some issue, I think a year or two ago, with workers in one of their factories being abused somehow. I don't remember the exact details. Something like the company didn't want to work with the union or was firing people in retaliation for something. There was some damn thing that resulted in them getting sued. And I think they actually ended up losing the case. So there was some commentary about that in the foreign policy realm, about whether that might augur a falling out in relations between Brazil and China. That was never going to happen, and it didn't. You know, obviously Brazil is going to give Chinese companies some leeway in order to continue to maintain the benefit of Chinese investment. It's the same sort of relationship a lot of developing countries have with companies investing from the developed world. You know, they kind of let them get away with stuff so that they can continue to be in their good graces and to maintain the flow of money. So I would guess the Brazilian government is kind of willing to look the other way over indiscretions, shall we say, from BYD or other companies. And not even just Chinese companies, just foreign companies in general, so that they can continue to attract FDI. That's a pretty normal play in the playbook of developing countries. But it could also just be explicit corruption. Maybe they just bribed the government to keep them off the list in question. You can't really rule that out entirely. The whole Odebrecht scandal kind of proved that. That really illustrated that mass conspiracies involving bribery are totally viable in Latin America. Would you have any advice for an American digital intelligence researcher who's been having some difficulty trying to donate the brain's programming language, how to create awareness and self-awareness to the American people, but is being prevented from being able to engage with Congress by conservative elements in the executive branch? Very cheeky. I don't know. How do you break through to people?
You have
That's one of those
to
really
connect with the emotional core. You can reason with people, but only if people are open to reason, and that's a more specific criteria that requires you to have trust. So the way you get trust is by emotional connection. And I think that's a big part of how populists find success in politics, or at least success in the terms of getting elected, is they really hit the emotional core of what people are talking about. And you can find different notes to strike depending on what you're trying to convince people of, but it has to be delivered in such a way that it seems like it's beneficial to them, and you need to seem like an ally to them. So, yeah. Humans are very vulnerable to persuasion and trickery. Some of it can be done for better means than others. But I would try to find whatever you're trying to change or do, what is the way that you can pitch it to people in a way that it sounds good to them. And there's a lot of buzzwords that you can hit that make them very excited. Watch any presidential debate and you get the gist of this, where it's about how many times you can say win, liberty, freedom, America. The more you say those words, the more people like you and are open to what you're going to say. So find common ground and present yourself as an ally, I think, rather than that you are someone who's fighting against the current stuff that's happening.
Well said. Yeah, I would defer to you on that, because I'm not really the best at building rapport with people or convincing people or compelling people. I don't have that in my wheelhouse. Yeah, I'm more big picture.
Mm-hmm.
As I've said before, I'm not anybody's mother on here, so I'm not going to tell people what to think, what to believe. I offer information.
Mm-hmm.
How are we doing on time?
Going for over 2 hours now. And if it's ever a particularly slow week, we don't need to force a 3 hour if it's not too much happening.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had 1:48 on my stopwatch.
This is 2 hour 12.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Well, that's all the important stuff I had. I don't. Most of what else I have in my notes is just miscellaneous. So unless there's something else you wanted to get to, we might wrap it up a little early.
Sure.
So any other hot topics you wanted to touch on? Some particular region or country or what have you?
What's the status on the U.S. posturing that they might quit NATO?
The Germany stuff I mentioned when we were talking about Iran is the main entry there.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, though, there hasn't really been a steady cadence of such threats out of the Trump administration for the past couple months. They whined about it more at the start of the Iran conflict. Well, not really at the start of it, maybe a couple weeks in when they were starting to try to get other countries to help. But that was sort of the high point. You know, before and after that, they haven't really brought it up nearly as much.
Mm.
Yeah, I think Trump just likes to throw out American points of leverage whenever, without really thinking about it. I don't know that there's really an overarching strategy to the way that he applies pressure. There's something that he wants, he applies pressure, he either gets it or doesn't, and then he moves on to the next thing. That seems to be more his MO. And one of the American points of leverage over Europe is the potential threat of just withdrawing from NATO and just leaving them to fend for themselves. So Trump understands that's a point of leverage. There are other things that he wants. So why not use the point of leverage to get those things? That seems to be about the extent of the logic in play. So I don't really take it all that seriously as like a statement of purpose. I don't really think he wants to withdraw from NATO. He may well be skeptical of NATO. There's plenty of people in the United States who are. But I think overall, he just likes using leverage in negotiations for the sake of it. I don't think there's like an overarching plan there. And I don't think the fact that he uses that leverage is indicative that he's secretly plotting to just completely withdraw from NATO. Now, I have to add the usual caveat here, which is that he could surprise us. You never really know what he's going to do. He tends to be pretty mercurial. So it's entirely possible that he actually does just make a play and just leave. But as I understand it now, given what I know about him from past precedent and what he's doing in this administration, I think it's just theater. We'll see if it stays theater, but that's my impression for the moment. So is there another issue, another topic?
Have you heard about China's water scarcity in the northern region?
Oh yeah, that's well publicized. It's just very dry up there. Yeah, lots of dust storms, things like that. It stemmed originally from deforestation. Northern China actually used to be really well forested, but thousands of years of civilization pretty well destroyed all of that. There's actually a really interesting national forest in China. I think in the Los Plateau. I think that's what it's called. If you don't know what the Los Plateau is, assuming I'm getting the name right, that's actually where Chinese civilization first emerged. The Yellow River kind of runs through it, but it's northwest of where the more settled plains are, where the bulk of the Chinese population is now. Originally, Chinese civilization emerged out of like villages and small principalities that emerged along the Yellow River in hill country in the Los Plateau. And that used to be covered entirely in forest, but today there's virtually none. It almost looks semi-arid now if you look at pictures of it. But there was one emperor early on that recognized that deforestation was happening rapidly in the plateau. And he actually set aside some portion of the plateau as an early national park. And successive administrations in China for like more than 1,000 years, 2,000 years, however long it's been, since then have actually maintained that forest, maintained that national park, rather. So the result is that the entire Los Plateau is virtually barren of trees, except for that one small parcel of national park that's been around forever. And it's actually like the last image that we have of what the Los Plateau originally looked like before human civilization pretty much stripped it bare. So it's pretty fascinating. Like, it's a window into the past, and it's all down to like that one emperor and all of the other governments after that decided to maintain it.
See, Loess Plateau spelled Loess in English.
Correct. Yeah.
World's largest plateau, covering 640,000 square kilometers. It has thick wind-deposited silt that's highly erodible. I see the deforestation here.
Yeah, that's why the Yellow River is called the Yellow River, because the tint of that soil is yellowish. And it all gets into the Yellow River and basically colors the whole thing. That's also why the emperors in China were always called Huangdi, yellow emperors. Yellow became basically the royal color. And it all kind of comes back to the fact that Chinese civilization emerged around and out of the Yellow River.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
that's a theme for a lot of ancient civilizations too, is a body of water gives you so many different advantages, from water you can drink or boil to drink if it's dirty. You can use it for work, you use it for irrigation. Egyptian civilization had the Nile River Delta. There's also the Tigris and the Euphrates.
Mm-hmm. You have the Indus. What was it? The big one in India. The Ganja, there you go.
Yeah.
The one that I can't pronounce correctly. Ganga? Is that what it was? I was calling it Ganges, and then somebody said that was wrong.
Yeah, I think Ganges is how most Americans would try to say it. That's how I had heard it initially.
I think there's another pronunciation for it in Hindi that I also can't remember. But yeah, that yellow soil and the Yellow River were really important. The yellow soil was what they built all of their early buildings out of, like at the beginning of Chinese civilization, and then even later for peasants. It was just a readily available building material. So between the yellow soil and the Yellow River, like yellow came to be like a really important color, to the point that emperors kind of monopolized it. I'm not sure how I got into that from a question about water scarcity. Yeah, that's what it was. Deforestation, that's what it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's thoroughly deforested now, and that's resulted in desertification, and that's resulted in water scarcity.
Yeah, it said overgrazing was a problem. So I guess if you have livestock of some kind, and that's an unusual amount of herbivores for the region, if they eat too many of the small plants, then I think the big trees will also die, because the big plants rely on the small plants to do things to the soil. Any biologist, please correct me. That's why you need predators to have wolves to cull some of the sheep, so you don't have too many.
Yeah, there's been a lot of big public policy projects in China. Big public works projects in China designed to address water shortages in the north of China. They've got a series of canals and pipelines that they've partly already built, but are also still constructing, that are supposed to bring water from relatively water-rich areas of China, especially in the west and southwest, to northern China. There's a huge amount of water in southwest China, lots of rivers and whatnot. And there's not nearly as many people in southwest China to kind of drink it or use it. So the government's trying to find ways to redirect that water northward for use there. There's also a massive forestation campaign that's happened over the past couple decades that's been fairly successful, as I understand it. They actually have regrown and replanted a number of forests in northern China. So it still suffers from water scarcity, partly because of population growth and ongoing desertification, but they have reversed the pace of desertification through their forestation campaign.
I see.
Yeah, so Beijing's water problem is well established, and the government is definitely working on it.
Have we noticed any consequences for cloud seeding and water redirecting and this sort of deal?
None that I know about, but that's also outside of my wheelhouse a bit. So I can't really confidently say there's not any consequences. There's got to be some kind of trade-off, presumably, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I would think as much, but usually we're kind of thinking short term of these people need water, we should save these people, which is valid and good, and you should. But at the same time, the more that you fuck with your environment, you're taking something from somewhere else, or you're putting garbage somewhere else that people aren't seeing. So
there you go.
We'll see what happens with the world. I had a science teacher in middle school who had a bit of an opposite take on that too. Like, oh, we need to be gentle to the planet and take care of our home and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, the Earth is trying to kill us, and the stuff on Earth is going to outlive us, so we just need to try to survive.
Well said.
We'll see how it goes. But yeah, if we don't have much else, we could wrap up a bit early.
Very well.
It's been a relatively quiet week for me. Browse memes sometimes. I'm watching The Boys' new season that's releasing. I told you I was watching Invincible. Not really in an anime right now. I started to watch Sentenced to be a Hero, and I think I'm 2 or 3 episodes in. It seems pretty good. It's a little bit of a different take on being an adventurer who helps people, in that being a hero is a bad thing. It's a thing you can be sentenced with, where if you've committed a certain level of crime against the government or whatever, then they will kill you and then resurrect you and make you work for them. So it's sort of like a fate worse than death, depending on how you frame it or what the character does. But yeah, it's got some interesting dynamics that are different from your standard adventuring trope. So we'll see if it keeps my attention. The art is pretty good. Characters seem pretty good.
Sentenced to be a Hero.
Yep, and that one's on Crunchyroll too.
Nice. Have you thought about trying any Chinese anime?
I don't know what I would watch of those.
There's not a whole lot of it out there. They had a special term for it. Donghua?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what they're calling it. Yeah, there hadn't been a lot, but over the past couple years, they've actually reduced some good ones that are fairly well regarded. So if you're interested in trying something anime, but not quite anime, that might be something you look at. I think one of them was like a time travel show. They had an interesting spin on it. They were running like a time travel service where you could go back and fix a whatever problem. But there were a lot of rules attached to it. They had like 2 guys. One of them, yeah, I don't remember it well enough to recount the exact plot, but yeah, that was one of them that's supposed to be pretty good. Let me see if I can find the title. Link Click, that's what it was. I think there was another one too that was the LGBT community kind of latched onto it because one of the main characters was gay. But I don't remember the title of it. It's a supernatural one. I must have it written somewhere in my notes. I'll try to look. Maybe I'll tell you later if I find anything. But yeah, there's something there. The Chinese animation industry has improved to the point where they can produce competitive content.
Cool. I know South Korea has a similar scene, at least for their equivalent of manga. I think it's manhwa or something is how it's spelled. But they have their own stuff. The anime Solo Leveling is from a Korean manga thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's very, very standard tropes compared to
right?
a lot of shows. Yeah. It's got, like, the character can level up, so it feels... there's a growth curve there, which is cool to watch, but it's very, very standard with what happens. There aren't very many ambitious character types that seem unique or strange. The story doesn't really do anything super weird. It's like general beat 'em up, power up kind of stuff. Which the art is good, so it's cool to see the fights, but it's not like one of those masterpiece story reveal sort of epic tales like some of them are. Manhwa, thank you. Sea of Whiskey recommends for you Secrets of the Silent Witch.
That sounds familiar. think I might have seen somebody recommend that on a YouTube video. I will put it on my list regardless. I'm always down for good storytelling.
Nice.
Planescape Torment, by the way, continues to deliver on that. That's a fun story. I'll stop pushing it when I finally beat the damn thing. I think I'm getting closer.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna go get some food and then go back to the degenerate trenches.
Oh, God.
Yep.
Good hunting.
Yeah, thank you. Did you get a walk in this week?
I did not, because I hurt my foot. So
Oh, yeah. You
walking is probably going to be on hold for a while.
I see. Very well.
Yeah,
Then recover swiftly and hydrate yourself.
That's the plan. I don't want to screw it up like I did the last time I hurt my foot. Just kind of walked around on it for a day or two, trying to walk it off, and then made it way worse.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been well behaved this time. I'm staying off of it.
That's a important life lesson, is to treat injuries carefully. The worst injury I had for my legs and running was when I slightly messed up a tendon doing some closer to sprinting interval training before a marathon. And then I had some drama, like relationship drama stuff that was very emotionally intense. And I was very frustrated and angry. And I ran really fast, really far when I should have just had a rest day, maybe like 3 days of rest to fully recover from the minor injury. So I converted my minor injury into a major injury by running on it when I should have let it heal. So
yeah,
don't do that. Dumb shit I did in my early 20s. Woohoo.
Well, to be fair, that's the time to do it. You can bounce back.
Yeah, that's true.
It gets
still
progressively
able to
harder.
walk and run today.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. Thank you, chat. Thank you, Steve Whiskey, for handling questions. Thank you, Agent Smith, for your time. We will see you on the next episode of World Discussion with Agent Smith. Smith.
Thanks again. Always a privilege. Talk to you next time.
GG.